Any historical inaccuracies should just be accepted as being work of fiction. Chapter 1. Release. 13th of August, 1064. 14 years since the kingdoms of North and South Equivalis were struck with war. 14 years since its residents were cast aside or evacuated. If not killed, of course. Now the kingdoms are nothing but a hole in the ocean as a result of the silent splendour. There was once joviality amongst this kingdom, but now all that stands are devastated suburbs surrounding the hole in the ocean. Things may never be the same again. A young man sat gazing upon the desolate coastline of North Equivalis. He watched the ocean cringe and continue as his long golden hair flowed like the tide the cold draught brought forth. He exhaled with sorrow, closing his amber eyes and reopening them, wishing he and his cousin gazed upon the same ocean. He looked down, taking an article out of his pocket of brown, looking at it in pity, and folding it back into his pocket, for the memories it brought back ached his mind, like something was missing for him in North Equivalis. Someone evacuated 14 years ago in a solitary carriage. How he wished he could have done the same. He took out the article once more, but this time looking at the other side for the first time. In that moment, the man realized that just because something was never done, doesn't mean it can never be done. For home is only home when something isn't missing from your heart.
New Equivalis,
he stated, holding up the article as he returned to open his front door. His mind knew he was home, but his heart retaliated. What? Asked a fiery-haired young lady, closing the door behind her, her muted pink dress flowing in the grey draught and orange fringe slowly flowing back toward her small bun. The man showed her the article, a bright illustration. New Equivalis, a country not far from North and South Equivalis, only several decades since founded and almost mimics North and South Equivalis' former splendour.
Is there anything for us here, Saren?
The man began.
We must move there.
He pointed to the illustration. Arun, you've been thinking of moving forever. What draws you toward this place? Saren asked.
It's a propaganda, Saren. They need more recruits for their royal military. Plus, something in the art seems familiar. It's pulling me towards this place.
Saren began to turn away. Go bid your friends farewell. It's your choice.
Come on, Saren, you're my sister. I want us to stick together.
Stepsister. Arun looked at her like she was a broken mirror. He wanted them to stick together, but they were like two hearts, with one being a refraction of the other. I guess a refraction isn't quite the same as a reflection, but alas, refractions must go in different directions to their counterparts.
If you do change your mind, you'll know where to find me,
he stated. Maybe he'd find what in the art drew him toward this place, or maybe he'd at least feel whole again. After all, heart is he without art, and art is something a mirror cannot replace. 16th of October, 1064. Exiting the boat and entering a bright new land. New Equivalis at last. Even the harbour was glowing. The exquisite sight of banners and flags hung upon the colourful haytop roofs blowing in the warm breeze, directing any newcomer to the city centre, crowded with smiles and purity. Although Arun had come alone to this new land, the greetings from strangers and smiles from children told him otherwise. He headed towards the hills where a beautiful castle stood, tinted in golden sunlight. Letter of acceptance in his golden hand, he approached the hill, excited to start a new working and home life. Not before he had reached the bottom of the hill, he noticed a small spruce door enslaved in wooden planks placed within the base of the hill. Hesitantly, he looked away from it and up towards the chalet homes going up the hill, in rows, blanketing the castle. For the road was long and the spruce door shook with ringing, calling him to enter. He peeked through the lock and saw a small flight of stone stairs. As he leant in, the door opened. This called him to proceed down. The journey was quick, Day faded to darkness, and the stairs evolved into a void amongst lonely cells, iron bars and rusty chains lying dead upon the dusty floor. Arun realized he was now face to face with the castle dungeon. He looked around for any castle staff to point him in the way of the southern wing, but none could be seen, for he was alone in this dungeon. No prisoners, no guards, just empty space. Arun walked down the dungeon until that of a small, high-pitched call was audible from afar. Creeping further into the dungeon, his ears as a guide, the cell began to unveil a high female voice, pleading for unforeseen freedom.
Is anyone out there?
Arun asked, hand on sword. Oh, please let me out, please, the voice cried.
What's your business?
Arun asked as he approached the single cell. In the dim candlelight sat a weak, young princess, with short purple curls and a silver tiara upon her head.
Who are you?
Arun gasped. The princess lay upon the floor weeping, her sapphire eyes bleeding tears onto the floor where her pink dress lay in a dusty clump. The sorry sight broke Arun's heart. Seeing someone so weak in this happy and jovial city was something he'd never wanted to seek. I'm a lost princess, she finally spoke. I was sent here to this castle for an audience, but the guards just locked me up in here for trespassing. I didn't mean any harm. I was only sent here for an audience, she sobbed.
I promise I'll get you out. How do I know I can trust you?
The princess went silent, turning away and backing down onto the floor, sobbing.
There, don't cry. Stand back,
he began. The princess obeyed, watching the way Arun brandished his steel and struck his sword against the lock, shattering it. The bar swung open and an overjoyed princess ran into Arun's arms. Oh, thank you so much, she exclaimed.
It was my pleasure,
Arun stated, putting his arms around the princess after lowering his sword. How did you do it?
I guess it's just my strength.
Arun smiled as he let go of the princess. Oh! The princess chuckled, her face turning pink as rose. Who are you?
Arun. I came here to have my first day as a castle soldier, but making you happy has made me more joyful than any promotion.
Oh, I'm Princess Fleur.
Chatty little thing, aren't you?
Arun chuckled. Fleur blushed lightly.
I may not be Prince Charming, but I'm glad to have been at your service.
He bowed lightly. Fleur giggled.
Now, you're a princess. Don't you have some place to be?
My grandma sent me here to meet the rulers, but I think she sent me to the wrong place. I must go tell my carriage.
Ah, yes. I promise I'll alert the guards of their mistake, since I am awaiting the position of Sergeant Major,
he stated. He politely escorted the princess to a set of silver stairs toward what he believed to be the southern wing. Once sunset shone through the golden halls, they parted ways, but not before they exchanged addresses in hopes of writing to one another. Arun had made a new friend. But was new friendship really what he had seen written in the illustration of New Equivalis summoning him here in the first place? Arun stepped down the golden castle halls decked in violets, greeted by guards as he passed. He observed the beautiful art and paintings that were presented to his vision. At that moment, something clicked. The art had reminded him of his most dearest cousin, lost to evacuation 14 years ago. Her absence killed him, for he saw her resemblance within the new equivalent art, pushing him towards this new kingdom in hopes of finding her. As he walked, he thought back to his past. He wondered if Seren was okay, if North Equivalis would ever rebuild itself, where his other evacuated cousins were. It had been over a decade since he had seen them. Back to reality, the air turned bitter and the light thinned. Suddenly, something was crashed into Arun among the darkness.
Ah!
The two collided. A small candle was dropped upon the greystone floor. In its light, a pale young woman in a deep red gown, complete with golden jewellery, lay on the floor. Hastily, Arun outstretched his hand and helped her up.
I'm terribly sorry. Honest mistake on my part,
Arun exclaimed. Denied, fellow tourist, she said in disgust. Arun looked up. Upon her head, sitting in front of her raven bun, was a ruby-encrusted crown so golden. A queen's crown.
I promise to be more careful, my lady,
he insisted. He looked upon her crown again, with a sense of familiarity. He looked into the lapis eyes of the lady past the short raven hairs that framed her slightly blushing face. Seeing her eyes in the flesh made him realize he'd found what he had been seeking all along.
Crimson? It can't be! I've missed you so much! He exclaimed.
It took Crimson a couple seconds to realize who stood before her. She took in his straight flaxen hair and captivating eyes, the tone of his voice, so low in pitch but so smooth and soothing. Something clicked in her mind. "Cousin?" she exclaimed, almost tackling him to the ground as she threw her arms around him. "I've missed you, Arun." Arun did the same.
"I've missed you too, Crimson,"
he finally said, letting go of her waists. "What brings you here at last?" asked Crimson.
North Equivalis just wasn't for me anymore. Something in the propaganda art for this place reminded me of you. Drawing me here took me a while to realize it.
I drew it in hopes of you seeing it and recognizing memories of us.
How though? There's got to be magic involved.
I miss living in North Equivalis, but this land is so much better.
I agree.
So, where's your employment? Crimson asked.
Actually, I'm the new Sergeant Major of the Royal Guard.
Arun chuckled. You mean you're working here? Crimson asked, walking off westerly.
Why, yes. Is this your palace?
He asked, following her. It is, she replied, stopping in her tracks.
Sorry,
he smiled, stepping back. No, come, she began, opening a velvet green curtain. For the night is warm. The sun lay in its blanket of sky, guarded by the moon and stars. The deep green grass blew in the autumn breeze. The lights of the town, alighting the pale faces, awoke the night, making it feel alive in the distance. An ambient romantic silence sung in the air. What a lovely night we're having, Crimson finally stated, her dress rustling in the breeze as it lay in the grass.
Isn't it, though?
Arun replied, putting his arm around her. There was another silence between the two. So, Arun finally began.
You're queen?
Supposed to be, although it's only a title.
How so?
All I do is write legal documents and design propaganda. I enjoy all the creative stuff, but these days get a little repetitive.
I see. How long have you been queen for?
A few years now, Crimson hesitated. There was another silence between them. I'm not very talkative, Crimson finally said.
I can remember, Arun chuckled.
You didn't need words to keep him awake, though. Infinity thoughts pounded in his head. Should he ask her about the whereabouts of her siblings? Should he tell her about the arrival of his stepsister? Should he ask her how and why she is queen, or who is king? Or should he just stay lost in her lapis eyes and blushing face? Crimson stared up into the cosmos, her eyes catching a glimpse of Arun in the corner of her vision. She sank back into his arms. He looked upon the crown on her head, which was now in his chest.
Your crown?
He began. Huh? Crimson asked, lifting her head.
Your crown, my dear. Was it your mother's?
Once. She gave it to me as well as my father's coronet. No idea why. I assume as I was originally heir to the throne, she began, taking the crown off her head and into her hands, inspecting its details.
About your siblings. Where are they now?
Arun asked hesitantly. Before the war broke out, she evacuated all 7 of us in a carriage. We were took all across the 7 seas, and I'm not sure of their whereabouts, she said, putting the crown back upon her head. When I came here in 1051, the old rulers had vanished, so a few years later when I was old enough, I took over. My mother's lucky I even kept her crown to begin with.
What do you mean? She died fighting for your father's vengeance.
And killed innocent people in the process. She was horrible to me and my siblings, so pressuring, so biased, so tyrant-like.
Crimson, she did it out of love, Arun stated, letting go of her.
Still not an excuse to assassinate the King and Queen of the South. They did nothing. Just because the person behind my father's regicide happened to be Southern doesn't make them evil. She's always had a grudge against them, blinded by ambition. Crimson leapt up.
Crimson, Southerners are wicked people. Your mother did all this to protect us.
That's what she wants you to think.
Have you ever met a Southerner?
Crimson hesitated at the question. The heavy autumn breeze picked up. Have you?
Out of the question.
Arun stood up ferociously. Crimson backed away in fear. Let's say we part ways like our thoughts intend. She accidentally bit her tongue on that statement, so hard it began to ooze boiling blood.
Crimson, I'm not done. Answer the question.
Arun approached her eye on eye. Arun, leave. I fear of you making it worse. She turned away.
Crimson, this place is where I work and reside, is it not? For I cannot leave.
Crimson froze at that statement as her blood turned blue. Then you keep east and I'll keep west.
Is that all?
Arun asked, folding his arms. Stay out of the west wing. Crimson stomped her foot so hard it shook the leaves. Black sparks emerged from her eyes and behind her before disappearing as sharply as they came. Her breathing then became heavy.
I'd never enter a place full of sorcery.